midday shoot today. Um, oops. Like I said, midday shoot today. Gonna go play basketball later today. Finished up a final. I only have one more final, which is next week. And then I'll be on to break, which is nice. Get to spend time with family, go back home. But without further ado, let's get into it. Scripting others. Most people are a function of the social mirror, scripted by the opinions, the perceptions, the paradigms of the people around them. As interdependent people, you and I come from a paradigm that includes the realization that we are part of that social mirror. We can choose to reflect back to others a clear, undistorted vision of themselves. We can affirm their proactive nature and treat them as a responsible people. We can help script them as principle-centered, value-based, independent, worthwhile individuals. And with the abundance mentality, we realize that giving a positive reflection to others in no way diminishes us. It increases us because it increases opportunity for effective interaction with other proactive people. At some point in your life, you probably had someone believe in you when you didn't believe in yourself. They scripted you. Did that make a difference in your life? What if you were a positive scripter, an affirmer of other people? When they're being directed by the social mirror to take the lower path, you inspire them toward a higher path because you believe in them. You listen to them and empathize with them. You don't absolve them of responsibility. You encourage them to be proactive. Perhaps you're familiar with the musical Man of La Mancha. It's a beautiful story about a medieval knight who meets a woman of the street, a prostitute. She's being validated in her lifestyle by all of the people in her life. But this poet knight sees something else in her, something beautiful and lovely. He also sees her virtue, and he affirms it over and over again. He gives her a new name, Duluncia, a new name associated with a new paradigm. At first, she utterly denies it. Her old scripts are overpowering. She writes him off as a wild-eyed fantasizer, but he is persistent. He makes continual deposits of unconditional love, and gradually it penetrates her scripting. It goes down into her true nature, her potential, and she starts to respond. Little by little, she begins to change her lifestyle. She believes in and acts from her new paradigm to the initial dismay of everyone else in her life. Later, when she begins to revert to her old paradigm, he calls her to this deathbed and sings that beautiful song, The Impossible Dream, looks her in the eyes and whispers, "Never forget your Duluncia." One of the classical stories in the field of self-fulfilling prophecies is of a computer in England that was accidentally programmed incorrectly. In academic terms, it labeled a class of bright kids dumb kids and a class of supposedly dumb kids bright. And that computer reported was the primary criterion that created the teacher's paradigm about their students at the beginning of the year. When the administration finally discovered the mistake 5.5 months later, they decided to test the kids again without telling anyone what had happened. And the results were amazing. The bright kids had gone down significantly in IQ points. That had seen and treated as mentally limited, uncooperative, and difficult to teach. The teacher's paradigm had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But scores in the supposedly dumb group had gone up. The teachers had treated them as though they were bright, and their energy, their hope, their optimism, their excitement had reflected high individual expectations and worth for their kids. These teachers were asked what it was like during the first few weeks of the term. For some reason, our methods weren't working. They replied, "So we had to change our methods." The information shows that the kids were bright. If things weren't working well, they figured it had to be the teaching methods. So they worked on methods. They were proactive. They worked in their circle of influence. Apparent learner disability was nothing more or less than teacher inflexibility. What do we reflect to others about themselves, and about how much does that reflection influence their lives? We have so much we can invest in the emotional bank accounts of other people, The more we can see people in terms of their unseen potential, the more we can use our imagination rather than our memory. With our spouse, our children, our co-workers, our employees, we can refuse to label them. We can see them in new, fresh ways each time we're with them. We can help them become independent, fulfilled people capable of deeply satisfying, enriching, and productive relationships with others. Gothel taught, treat a man as he, and he will remain as he is. As he is, and he will remain as he is. Treat a man as he can and should be, and will become as he can and should be. Balance and renewal. The self-renewal process must include balanced renewal in all four dimensions of our nature: the physical and the spiritual, the mental and the social/emotional. Although renewal in each dimension is important, it only becomes optimally effective as we deal with all four dimensions in wise and balanced way. To neglect any one area negatively impacts the rest. I have found this to be true in organizations as well as in individuals' lives. In an organization, the physical dimension is expressed in economic terms. The mental or psychological dimension deals with the recognition, development, and use of talent. The social/emotional dimension has to do with human relations, with how people are treated, and the spiritual dimension deals with finding meaning through purpose or contribution and through organizational integrity. When an organization neglects any one or more of these areas, it negatively impacts the entire organization. The creative energies that could result in tremendous positive synergy are instead used to fight against the organization and become restraining forces to growth and productivity. I have found organizations whose only thrust is economic, to make money. They usually don't publicize that purpose. They sometimes even publicize something else. But in their hearts, their only desire is to make money. Whenever I find this, I also find a great deal of negative synergy in the culture, generating such thing as interdepartmental rivalries, defensive and protective communication, politicking, and masterminding. We can't effectively thrive without taking money, but that's not sufficient reason for organizational excellence. We can't live without eating, but we don't live to eat. At the other end of the spectrum, I've seen organizations that focus almost exclusively on the social/emotional dimension. They are, in a sense, some kind of social experiment, and they have no economic criteria in their value system. They have no measure or gauge of their effectiveness, and as a result, they lose all kinds of efficiencies and eventually their viability in the marketplace. I have found many organizations that develop as many as 3 of the dimensions. They may have good service criteria, good economic criteria, and good human relations criteria, but they are not really committed to identifying, developing, utilizing, and recognizing the talent of people. And if these psychological forces are missing, the style will be a benevolent autocracy, and the resulting culture will reflect different forms of collective resistance and adversarialism. Excessive turnover and other deep chronic culture problems, organizations as well as individual effectiveness requires development and renewal of all 4 dimensions in a wise, balanced way. Any dimension that is neglected will create negative force-field resistance that pushes against effectiveness and growth. Organizations and individuals that give recognition to each of these 4 dimensions in their mission statement provide a powerful framework for balanced renewal. This process of continuous improvement is the hallmark of the total quality movement and a key to Japan's economic ascendancy. I'll take a pause there. Don't just be good at one of them, be good at all of them. And if it takes time, it takes time. But at least try. Is what I got from balance and renewal. But one thing I wanted to chat about for sure was the idea to see other people and their potential. And one of my other favorite books is Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. But I think this captures some of that, where just because you may think someone is not the brightest doesn't mean that you shouldn't give them the fullest potential, or you shouldn't give them the peace of mind to listen, to understand, but also to give some wisdom and some acknowledgement. This could be to any of your friends, this could be to your coworker, it could be to anybody. Just because you may not think they're at your level doesn't mean that you shouldn't take the opportunity to help them to get to where they want to go, or to help them to see where you think they can go. You know, many people, I would say probably in this day and age, they have a lot of pressure on themselves, but sometimes they need a little bit of an extra hand. And you can be that friend, you can be that coworker, you can be that father. So why not go out there and do it? Why not change your own life, but on the same journey, start to change other people's lives the best way that you can? And I think that's super important. Going back to what we said earlier in the last video about service, you know, what is your life mission, but also how can you integrate the idea of service into your life, to give back, to give back to the people who need it, or to give back to the people who are in less circumstances or less abilities or less of a mindset than you are. So yeah, scripting others, change your script. How about that one, huh? See ya.